Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're pulling back the curtain on a financial tool. Maybe not one you think about daily, but it's really vital for an industry we all count on: food production.
We're talking about accounts receivable factoring.
Exactly. And specifically, how it helps the folks growing, processing, distributing our food tackle some, well, pretty new cash flow issues.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're really leaning on insights from factoring specialist Chris Lehnes, drawing from his work on this.
Right. Our mission today, to really get clear on why factoring isn't just, another finance option for food producers.
For a lot of them, it's almost a strategic necessity. It helps navigate those tight margins, the seasonal swings, and that constant headache of getting paid on time.
It's funny, you pick up, say, a carton of milk or fruit at the store,
Yeah,
and you just don't think about the financial gymnastics needed to get it there.
not at all. But it's intense.
Especially in an industry where freshness is key, the supply chain's long. Having that working capital isn't just nice to have.
No, it's the engine. It truly keeps everything moving. The food world operates under, well, some really specific pressures, makes managing the day-to-day money side much harder than in many other sectors.
Okay, so what makes it so tough? Let's start with the basics. What exactly is working capital, and why this specific headache for food producers?
So think of working capital as the cash a business needs readily available just to operate day to day. Technically, it's current assets, cash, inventory, what customers owe you, receivables minus current liabilities bills due soon, supplier invoices, short-term debt.
Got it. The operational fund.
Exactly. And for a food producer, this money is constantly flowing out, buying seeds, raw ingredients, paying farm labor or processing staff, covering fuel, transport, keeping equipment maintained.
All the essentials just to keep the lights on and the product moving.
Precisely. But then you hit the food industry specific hurdles. First off, seasonality. Big one.
Right. Farming rhythms, holidays.
Yeah, harvests are timed, demand for certain foods spikes. Like around holidays, consumer habits shift. It means income can be really up and down through the year.
Uneven income, but the bills for things like labor, utilities, land, those keep coming steadily.
They don't stop. Then there's the huge issue of perishable inventory. This is critical.
Unlike selling, widgets or something.
Exactly. Food has a shelf life, a ticking clock. Once it's harvested or made, you have got to move it fast. So if you've paid to produce something, shipped it, and then faced delays getting paid, it creates this massive cash flow jam, especially when you need cash now to start the next batch before the first one's even paid for.
Sounds like you're always chasing the money for the next cycle while the cash from the last one is still stuck somewhere.
That's a perfect way to put it. And layering on top of that pressure, the payment terms.
The big buyers.
The big buyers.
Right.
Supermarket chains, national distributors. They often hold a lot of the cards, and standard terms can easily be 60, 90, I've even heard 120 days. So you've delivered maybe hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars worth of product.
Product that's probably already being sold.
Could be on the shelves already, but the actual cash you're owed, tied up for months.
So you've paid for everything, materials, labor, transport, shipped it out, and you're still 2 or 3 months from seeing the revenue.
Yeah.
That gap sounds enormous.
Stressful. It really, really is. And this gap, this chronic gap between spending and receiving cash, that's why traditional financing, like, say, a standard bank loan or even a line of credit, might not always cut it.
Not flexible enough.
Yeah.
Or fast enough.
Could be either or both. They might not have the speed or the adaptability needed for these very specific, often sudden working capital demands driven by a harvest, a big unexpected order, or just payment delays.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the problem. So let's bring in the solution Chris Lehnes talks about. Accounts receivable factoring. Layman's terms, what is this?
Okay, at its core, factoring is basically selling your unpaid invoices, the money your customers legally owe you for stuff you've already delivered, selling them to a third-party company. That company is called a factor.
Okay.
And you sell them at a bit of a discount. But the key is you get cash almost immediately instead of waiting, for the customer to pay eventually.
So instead of that 60 or 90-day wait for the grocery chain to pay up, You could get a big chunk of that cash in, what, a day or two?
That's the idea, yeah. Usually within 24 to 48 hours, the factor is essentially buying that future payment from you. Now, there are a few key bits to how it works. First is the advance rate.
Okay.
That's the percentage of the invoice's face value the factor pays you right away. Typically, it's somewhere between, say, 70% and 90%.
So not the full 100% upfront.
Right, not usually. The rest, that 10% to 70%, is called the reserve. The factor holds that back.
Okay, why?
They hold it until they actually collect the full payment from your customer. Once your customer pays the factor then releases that reserve amount back to you, but they subtract their fees first.
Ah, the fees. That's how the factor makes money and covers their risk, I guess.
Exactly that. The fees usually cover a couple of things. There's often a discount fee, basically the charge for getting the cash early, often tied to how long it takes the customer to pay. Plus, sometimes there might be admin fees.
Makes sense.
And the article also mentions there are generally two main types. Recourse factoring, meaning your business still holds the risk if, for some reason, your customer doesn't end up paying that invoice.
Okay.
And the other is non-recourse factoring. In that case, the factor takes on the credit risk. If the customer defaults, it's the factor's problem, not yours.
Non-recourse sounds safer for the producer, but I bet it costs more.
Generally, yes. Higher risk for the factor usually means a higher fee. But, for a food producer dealing with maybe some very large buyers, or perhaps buyers whose payment reliability isn't guaranteed, transferring that risk can be worth the extra cost.
Got it. Sell the invoice, get most cash fast, factor collects, sends you the rest minus fees. Okay, this sounds like it directly hits that slow payment problem we talked about.
It does.
So how does this really help food producers with those specific challenges? The seasonality, the perishables, those long payment terms.
Right. This is where you really see the aha for this industry. The biggest, most immediate advantage, immediate access to cash.
Speed.
Turning invoices into cash in 24, 48 hours. That's transformative, especially with perishables. Money from a shipment delivered yesterday can literally pay for ingredients for tomorrow's production run.
Instead of waiting months.
Exactly. It kind of decouples your production costs from when your customers actually pay.
It stops that frantic chase for working capital you mentioned.
It really helps smooth things out. And that leads right into the next benefit, improved cash flow management. By factoring invoices, maybe consistently during peak times, a producer can create a much more predictable flow of cash.
Smooths out the bumps.
Right, those peaks and valleys from seasonal sales or those long waits for payments from the big guys. It just makes planning easier.
And what if a food producer is growing, trying to scale up? Does factoring help there?
Oh, absolutely. That's the flexibility and scalability piece. See, unlike a bank loan with a fixed ceiling, factoring capacity grows with your sales.
Ah, interesting.
Land bigger orders, issue bigger invoices. You can factor those and generate more immediate cash. Your funding ability scales up right alongside your growth opportunities.
So if you land a huge new contract with a national chain, you don't immediately face a cash crunch just trying to fund the production before you get paid.
Exactly. Factoring provides the fuel needed to actually fulfill that big order. And another really key point here, factoring isn't taking on more debt.
How so?
You're selling an asset you already own, that receivable, the money owed to you. It's not a loan. So it doesn't add debt liabilities to your balance sheet in the same way.
Which means it doesn't mess up your ability to get maybe a traditional loan for something else, like buying a new piece of equipment or expanding the plant.
Precisely. It keeps your traditional borrowing capacity intact for those kinds of capital investments. And one last thing, often overlooked but really valuable, outsourced collections.
The factor chases the payments.
The factor takes on that whole administrative task following up with your customers, making sure invoices get paid on time. That frees up the producer's team.
So they can focus on making food, not making collection calls.
Exactly. Focus on core stuff.
Yeah.
Quality, production, sales, logistics. Especially for smaller companies, that admin saving can be pretty significant.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, let's make this more concrete. Chris Lehnes gives some examples, right? How does this look in the real world?
Yeah, he's got some good ones, like a fruit canning company. Think about harvestmen. Huge costs hit all at once. Buying tons of fruit, hiring extra seasonal labor.
Right, very concentrated costs.
But their customers, maybe big food service distributors, they might take 60 days to pay those invoices. So the can of factors the invoices generated right after packing the fruit, gets cash immediately.
And uses that cash to
Pay the growers, pay the seasonal workers, cover the canning costs. It bridges that critical gap until the customer payments finally land. It's having the cash exactly when the cycle demands it most.
Makes sense. What else?
Okay, how about a bakery supplying national chains? They need to buy, say, huge amounts of flour upfront, manage complex shipping to get bread or cakes out nationwide.
Big upfront investment again.
Yep. And if the grocery chains pay in, say, 75 or 90 days, factoring those big invoices lets the bakery pay their flour supplier quickly, maybe even get a discount for paying early.
Oh, interesting.
And pay the truckers, keep production lines running smoothly without waiting months for that supermarket check. It basically funds the inputs needed for the output they've already sold.
Keeps the whole chain moving.
Exactly. And one more, a frozen food producer. They land a major new contract with a supermarket chain. Awesome, but
Need cash to ramp up production. Big time.
big time. Need more ingredients, packaging, maybe more freezer space or time. Waiting 90 days for that first big payment from the new customer. Just not feasible.
They might lose the contract if they can't deliver.
Could happen. So factoring those initial large invoices gives them the immediate funds to scale up production fast and actually deliver on that exciting new deal.
These examples really drive home how factoring acts like a lifeline right when the industry pressures bite hardest. But it sounds like who you choose to factor with. What should producers look for?
Well, Chris Lenz highlights a few key things. First, industry experience. Does the factor know the food and beverage sector?
Why does that matter so much?
Because they'll understand the patterns, the seasonality, things like retailer chargebacks for spoiled goods, the regulatory stuff, the different types of buyers. They're not just finance generalists. They get your specific world. They know why a delay on fresh produce is way different than a delay on, say, car parts.
Right. They speak the language.
Exactly. Then you've got to really dig into the fee structure. Is it totally transparent, competitive? Understand the advance rate, sure, but how is that discount fee calculated? Are there hidden admin fees, minimum volume requirement?
Need to know the true costs.
You have to be certain your profit margins can actually handle the cost of factoring. And, this is huge, since the factor interacts with your customers.
Their customer service has to be good. Really good.
Vital. They're basically acting as an extension of your finance team when they call your buyer for payment. You need absolute confidence they'll be professional, courteous. You don't want them damaging relationships you've worked hard to build.
Good point.
And finally, check their reputation. Ask for references. Talk to other clients if you can. Look for reviews online. You need a partner who is financially solid themselves, reliable, and ethical.
So, yeah, doing due diligence on the factor is as important as vetting a new customer.
Okay, we've heard a lot about the upsides, and they sound pretty compelling for food businesses. But every tool has its downsides, right? What are the risks? What should producers be careful about?
Definitely not a magic wand. There are things to watch. The big one is cost. Factoring is generally more expensive than, say, a traditional bank loan or line of credit, especially if you use it all the time long term.
You're paying for the speed and convenience. And the flexibility, yeah, so you really have to run the numbers. Do the benefits, like snagging that big profitable order you couldn't otherwise fund, or avoiding late fees you have to pay suppliers, or maybe getting discounts from suppliers for paying them early, do those benefits clearly outweigh the factoring fees?
It's a cost-benefit calculation. Is this cost unlocking more value elsewhere?
That's the question. Another thing is the potential impact on customer relationships. Even with a professional factor, some customers might just feel different dealing with a third party for payments.
Could be sensitive.
It can be. Being upfront and transparent with your buyers about the factoring arrangement often helps manage this, just letting them know what to expect.
Communication is key. Makes sense.
Yeah. There's also a potential risk of dependence. Factoring is great for bridging gaps, funding specific growth spurts, but becoming too reliant on it, maybe without fixing underlying cash flow issues or working towards more traditional financing options for the long haul, that might not be the healthiest path.
So use it strategically, not as a permanent crutch for everything.
That's the ideal, yeah. Think of it as a powerful tool in the kit, but maybe not the whole toolbox. And finally, really scrutinize the contract terms.
The fine print.
Always. Factoring agreements can be complex. Watch out for things like minimum volume commitments, what if your sales dip, or long lock-in periods that make it hard to switch factors or stop factoring if you get, say, a great bank loan offer later on.
Gotcha. Read carefully before signing. So, how does factoring fit into the bigger picture for a food producer's finances? Is it usually a standalone thing?
Rarely standalone, really. It tends to work best when it's part of a broader financial strategy.
Okay.
Strategic use is important. Like, use it specifically for navigating that peak harvest season or funding a particular large order or bridging a known payment gap with one specific slow-paying customer. Maybe not factoring every single invoice all year round.
Deploy it tactically.
Yeah, exactly. And it can also complement other tools. Factoring can sit alongside a traditional line of credit. Maybe the line covers general operating costs or inventory, while factoring speeds up cash from specific sales, or alongside equipment financing or even supply chain finance programs.
Having a mix of options. More resilience.
That's the idea, a diverse financing toolkit. And crucial to making this work is monitoring metrics. You have to track it.
Track what specifically?
Track the actual cost of factoring versus the benefits it's delivering. Are you actually taking on more profitable orders because of it? Are you avoiding late payment penalties to your own suppliers? Are you getting better terms from suppliers because you can pay them faster now? Is it helping you meet payroll without stress? Measure the ROI on that faster cash flow.
Right. Tracking the return on your working capital strategy. Makes total sense. Did the source mention any specific regulatory or ethical points around factoring in the food space?
Just briefly. It touches on the need to comply with general industry regulations, which factoring itself doesn't really change, and it reiterates the importance of transparency with customers about the arrangement.
We talked about that.
Yeah, and ensuring the factor uses strong data security since they're handling sensitive invoice and payment info. These are more like good business practices generally, but extra relevant when you bring a third party into those customer financial interactions.
Understood. Important fundamentals. Let's maybe hammer home the benefits with a couple more of those real-world examples from Lehnes' work.
Sure. There's a good one about an organic dairy producer. They were selling to health food stores, often means those 60-day payment terms again.
Yeah.
And they needed money to grow, buy more cows, expand their processing facility to meet rising demand for organic milk. Factoring their receivables let them fund that expansion without taking on traditional bank debt.
Wow. So the growth was funded directly by their sales,
Yeah.
just faster.
Exactly, without the waiting period. Then there's a small snack manufacturer. Imagine landing a huge first order from a national grocery chain. That's massive for a small company.
Game changer, but scary maybe.
Totally, because you need serious upfront cash for ingredients, packaging, maybe temporary staff, logistics. Factoring those first big invoices from the chain gave them the cash injection they needed.
So they could actually make the snacks and deliver.
Right. Scale up, fulfill the order, build credibility with that huge new customer. It turned a potential crisis into a huge opportunity realized.
Instead of missing out just because cash was tight.
Precisely. And one more, a family-owned produce distributor, dealing constantly with supermarkets taking their time to pay.
The standard problem.
Yeah. By consistently factoring invoices, they got predictable cash flow, which wasn't just good for their books. It meant they could pay the farmers they bought produce from much more quickly.
Passing the benefit upstream.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which can really strengthen those crucial farmer relationships. Maybe even let the distributor negotiate better prices from the farmers because they're known as a reliable, fast payer. It improves their position both upstream and downstream.
Creates positive ripples right through their supply chain.
It really can. And looking ahead, the factoring world itself is changing, which could make this tool even more useful.
How so? What's changing?
Well, the article points to the rise of digital platforms, fintech companies getting into the space, more competition.
Okay.
This is leading to things like faster approvals for businesses wanting to factor, potentially lower costs as technology makes things more efficient, better integration with accounting software, making the whole process just smoother.
Easier to use, basically.
Yeah, and we might even see factoring companies offering more flexible terms as they compete harder for business, making it faster, simpler, potentially cheaper to access this kind of funding.
Interesting. Any other future trends mentioned?
Yeah, one kind of intriguing note was about sustainability and ESG factors, environmental, social, governance.
How does that connect to factoring?
The idea is that maybe down the line, factors might start considering a food producer's sustainability practices as part of their evaluation. Or, conversely, producers might specifically seek out factors whose own corporate values, maybe around ESG, align with theirs.
That's a fascinating thought, linking these financial tools to broader ethical or environmental performance.
It's definitely an emerging area to watch.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, if there's one key takeaway about accounts receivable factoring for food producers,
Yeah.
what should listeners really hold on to?
I think the core message is that factoring is a uniquely powerful and really practical tool for this industry because it hits their biggest financial pain points head on.
The need for fast cash flow.
Right, to handle the seasonality, the perishables, and it directly addresses that challenge of waiting months for payment from big buyers. It tackles those fundamental liquidity hurdles.
Yeah, give them agility.
It does. Now, it's a tool, needs strategic use.
Yeah.
It's not a replacement for just good overall financial management, but used right. Factoring can be absolutely instrumental, unlocking working capital, letting businesses scale, giving them stability against fluctuations, ultimately just keeping that essential flow of food moving from farm to fork.
It fuels the day-to-day and the growth opportunities.
Exactly, by turning those future payments into cash now.
All right, so here's something to think about as we close out. We've seen how a specific financial tool like factoring provides really critical support for an essential industry like food production. It helps it function, it helps it grow, despite some pretty big hurdles. But maybe zoom out further. How do these kinds of financial mechanisms, the way capital flows or doesn't flow, how do they not just support, but actively shape the very structure, the operations, the relationships within our food supply chains? And looking even further ahead, how might future trends, like maybe embedding ESG factors into financing decisions, how might that change the flow of capital and reshape the future of our food system in ways we perhaps can't even fully imagine yet? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.